Keanu Reeves returns once again to portray John Wick in John Wick Chapter 4, the newest in the action thriller series from Chad Stahelski. Ugh, I have trouble pronouncing his name. He's the director of all the John Wick movies. Keanu Reeves, who we love so much, is back once again. So, what do I say about John Wick Chapter 4? Well, if you like the other John Wick movies, you'll probably like this one. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to go more into it in this review. This was my favorite John Wick since the first one. I'm going to be honest about this, and some folks might not like it. When it comes to the John Wick series 1, 2, and 3, I enjoyed them. They're fun, but some things about them, which I'm going to get into, can be a little bit annoying and kind of take me out of the film. So I feel like from the very beginning, if you look at John Wick 1, 2, and 3, the first one's always been my favorite. I love John Wick 1. John Wick 1 really felt like a vigilante movie, similar to the stuff that Steven Seagal used to do back in the 80s. And it's kind of a hybrid of like Steven Seagal action martial arts mixed with like Hong Kong, Chow Yun Fat type of movies. Those of you who are movie fans, you know what I'm talking about. Films like A Better Tomorrow, The Killer, Hard Boiled, these like run and gun crazy movies. There's a lot of Asian influence from Asian cinema in John Wick Chapter 4. Or in John Wick, this franchise overall, really. But of course, it continues in Chapter 4. But my big criticism of the John Wick series has been the unrealism of it. And because of that, it takes you out of the film. Unless you know how to train your brain for it. I want to explain what I mean here in a minute. So, everybody loves John Wick 1, 2, and 3. Like, I've had people who just go nuts over these movies talking to me about it. And I like them. I am not saying they suck. But you have to get yourself in the right frame of mind to watch these films. These are not realistic films in the slightest. John Wick, in all the movies, including this one, gets damaged more than any human being could possibly imagine and is okay. The dude's getting beat up with multiple weapons. He's getting hit by cars. He's falling, jumping out of windows and being perfectly fine. He's rarely ever injured, and when he bleeds or gets shot, a couple scenes later, he's okay. And that to me is a major, major thing that kind of took me out of the John Wick series until I was able to figure out how to treat it. The John Wick movies, including Chapter 4, and I'm going to get into why I like this one more than 2 and 3. Because I think if you like John Wick 2 and 3, you'll like this one. But even if you don't love John Wick 2 and 3, you'll probably love this one. But the mentality you have to remember with these movies is these films are basically live action video games. The way they're structured, the way they're edited, it literally feels like level, cutscene, level, cutscene, level, cutscene. It's got that. Like, just watch. Next time you watch these movies, especially the sequels, look for that. Because you know I'm right. It's like, you have John Wick fighting 50 guys. He beats them, move on to the next guy, then cutscene, next level. You have boss fights. Like, I'm just shocked they haven't milked this into video games. I know there's a video game called John Wick Hex that came out a few years ago. Why is there not like a third-person shooter that's like a John Wick story? It's literally a living video game. John Wick has different weapons. He uses swords, nunchucks, various different types of guns to kill. I mean, I genuinely wonder what the body count is for these movies. You know what I mean? Like, what is the body count? I'm sure somebody out there knows. I'm sure that number's been tallied. We got to be in the hundreds because a lot of people die. But if you go into the movie remembering that John Wick is basically playing a video game on easy mode, it's basically like putting a cheat code in, you'll appreciate the movie because it knows what it is. It does not take itself seriously at all. There's a scene in this movie, not to go into spoilers, but a character, I'm not going to say who, gets hit by a car going at least 55, 60 miles per hour and just jumps up. I'm not even making that up, So, if you go into the films with that mentality, you will appreciate them more. This movie, of course, continues the fact that everybody wants to kill John. There's a bounty on his head, and he has to figure out how to stop it. Now, why did I like this movie? What was it about this movie that made it better than 2 and 3? And I'm going to tell you right now, the supporting cast. I absolutely loved the supporting cast for this film more than in other John Wick movies. Donnie Yen plays Kane, who's like a blind martial artist. He's probably one of my favorite characters of all the John Wick movies. If they do a spin-off series with him, I'm in, because he is such a cool character, both in his decisions and choices he makes, as well as how badass he is. Besides that, you've also got a character that they refer to as the Tracker, or Mr. Nobody, played by Shamir Anderson. This is a great character. It's a guy who, he's a badass. He's got guns like everybody else, but he's also got this dog, right? And the dog will sit there and attack people, biting their nutsack or biting their face. And so when they introduced this character into the movie, as well as, having the dog, it's like a new element. It's like they're bringing in new things. This movie definitely raised the stakes. There's a lot less of the, in this one, there was a lot less of the unrealism. And I say that to say slightly less. There's a lot of it in here, but it definitely didn't go. I felt like chapter 3 went over the top. Here, it doesn't really get to over the top until the third act, which is just crazy. I mean, they have this scene in France with all these cars, and they're fighting between the cars. And, when you see the movie, you'll see it. It's just completely nuts. I'm not going to even go into the details because I don't want to spoil the movie for anybody. Now, when it comes to villains, Bill Skarsgård, who's been everywhere. I mean, he was in It. He was in James Bond. He's the villain of this film, the head villain, the Marquis, who puts a bounty on John Wick's head. So these characters made this movie a lot more fun. And also, one thing about this movie, besides the video game thing, is these movies have a certain look to them. Like when you watch a John Wick movie, you know what it looks like. The director and the filmmakers use a certain color palette to where things are very brightly colored, lots of neon lights, very noir type of stuff. You've got in this film in particular, John Wick goes to Japan, then some parts of Europe, and you really see the architecture. And what's crazy about the movie is that as I'm watching it, I'm like, I know it's just a movie, but the amount of property damage. They go to this, like, all these movies have these, like, really fancy hotels and churches and, these huge, expensive buildings, and they have these big firefights in them, and I'm like, damn, like, it kind of reminds me of a video game, specifically Call of Duty. There's actually a scene in this film that is shot with a top-down perspective. Like top down, like sort of like some of those Contra levels, or like the old GTA games, like the 1 and 2. So it kind of looks like Smash TV or like Zelda, the top down view. And you see him fighting all these dudes, and it feels so much like a video game, and it's wildly entertaining. But if you're going into this movie and you think that, if you're going into this film and you think that, damn, like this is goofy and silly. Yes, it is goofy and silly. But like I mentioned, these movies have a certain look to them, a certain like atmosphere to them, color palette. The characters are all pretty cool. And also the soundtrack. I felt like this film, out of all the John Wick movies, this one had my favorite soundtrack. I mean, the music is just bumping, like very enjoyable. I mean, I liked this movie better than 2 and 3, and I think no matter what you think about 2 and 3, I don't think you're gonna hate this one. The ending might be a bit controversial, which by the way, there is a post-credit scene, but I don't think John Wick fans will hate this one. I think that ultimately it's a movie that, again, it's difficult to really explain. I've tried my best to explain it. No, it's not for everyone, but if you go into it knowing what it is, you'll enjoy it. Like my dad would have hated this movie, but like people who are younger, like the video game generation, they get it. Also, I want to put over Hiroyuki Sanada, who's in this film, and he's phenomenal. And also, one of my favorite characters or actors, Scott Adkins, huge martial arts guy. He's in this film. And interestingly enough, Lance Reddick was in this movie. In case you didn't know, Lance Reddick just passed away recently. Very recently. So they don't even do like a tribute to him or anything like that. He is in this film, and this was one of his last movies, yo. And seeing him on screen, I was like, oh yeah, he just passed away. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, go see John Wick Chapter 4. It's like the John Wick movies remind me of the Fast and the Furious. They start out being these really simple like race movies, street racing, grounded, like what the first John Wick was. He wanted to get revenge for his dog. And then as the series progresses, it gets more and more and more wild. That's what happened with the Fast series. That's what's happening here with John Wick. Go check it out. and let me know your thoughts down below. If you have seen it, we'll talk about it. And if you want to avoid spoilers, y'all, this review didn't have any, but I would recommend probably not going in the comment section. If you want to avoid it, just go see the movie this weekend, and you'll have a good time. Like I said, you will have a good time. The movie's funny, over the top, and maybe not the best franchise ever, but still, like it's fun, and it really reminds me of like 80s B schlock. But that's what it's trying to do, and so it accomplishes that goal. Take care, y'all. I'll see you soon.